Hi, everyone. First of all, just to say, if you hear any clinking or clanking sounds like porcelain against porcelain or dishware against dishware, we are making Christmas dinner for tomorrow. So that's what's going on a couple of rooms over. So if you hear any of that stuff in the background, my apologies. But I did want to do at least one review today. This book is, it's by a writer whom I've read another book by, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But the writer is Fritz Stern, and the book is called Einstein's German World. Fritz Stern is actually the name that drew me to this book. It wasn't so much the book that I was looking for, but as I said, Fritz Stern did write a really, really interesting book, which I've also posted a review of on this channel if you're interested in looking at, called The Politics of Cultural Despair. And a really, really good book, well worth looking at. But this one was a little underwhelming, as I'll talk about. The French political philosopher Raymond Aron once remarked to Fritz Stern in conversation that the 20th century could have been Germany's century. This remark, which Stern mentions in the introduction to his book, creates an opening in which Stern examines re-emerging themes in early 20th century and late 19th century German history, like material strength and nationalism, and militarism and German culture, all through the eyes of many of Einstein's scientific coevals. In fact, from the biographical sketches that Stern produces in this book, he offers the uncontroversial opinion that Germany's decline into moral nihilism under Nazi rule, and the varying effects that had on professional classes within Germany, were some of the forces that prevented Germany from realizing its fullest potential. Not the most, as I said, controversial of theses. For this reason, the book is not nearly as interesting and engaging as The Politics of Cultural Despair. The first half of the book contains a series of miniature Plutarch-like biographies of several then contemporary German scientists. The immunologist Paul Ehrlich, also a Nobel laureate, the physicist Max Planck, and the chemist Fritz Haber. Haber being the only major convert to Christianity that Stern discusses in the book. But despite the title, some were much closer to Einstein than others. But of the four, Einstein was probably the one who never embraces militarism or encourages, who never embraced militarism, and who did encourage Zionism and embrace Zionism. Later in the book, Stern offers a couple of essays which discuss Zionism and some of its earlier participants and discussants, including Walther Rappenau and Chaim Weizmann, whose early faith in Zionism and the Zionist movement would later develop into something of a disappointment with that movement. There are two more essays, too, Travails of the New Germany and Lost Homelands, and both of these explore broader themes in contemporary German historiography, especially post-reunification themes, post-1990 themes. There's also a wonderfully polemical essay entitled The Gold Hog and Controversy, which argues against Daniel Goldhagen's supposed thesis, which he sets forth in his book called Hitler's Willing Executioners, that there was something in the German people themselves, something inherent in them, that drove them to orchestrate the Holocaust. And Stern attacks him for that idea and for a couple of other ideas. And the reason why I use the word supposed in that sentence is because I haven't read Gold Hagen's book, and I really wouldn't want to criticize it directly without doing so. So I'll sort of refrain from direct criticism or support of the book, but I will say that it's probably, because of its polemical tone, one of the more interesting essays in the collection. I've previously read, as I mentioned, and reviewed Stern's The Politics of Cultural Despair, a study in the rise of German ideology, and thought it to be one of the better books that I read this year, in 2012. And while I've taught math and science professionally, I read precious little of it for pleasure. But I was immediately interested in it when I saw Stern's name on the spine. I didn't know what the book was, or I didn't know what it is about this book, but he never really seems fascinated by the subjects in Einstein's German world nearly as much as he is in The Politics of Cultural Despair. Just as a very brief précis, in The Politics of Cultural Despair, he discusses three cultural critics from the mid-19th to the late 19th century in Germany, who all sort of bemoan the decadence and decline of German culture and the German people. In this book, in The Politics of Cultural Despair, he's really, really interested in the subject. He's really interested in what they're saying. And for some reason, that interest in that vim and verve is just absent from this book. He admits that he's never had a formal background in science, even though most of his subjects are professional scientists. And maybe that's a contributing factor to the problem, I don't know. While it's always a historian's task to remain as objective as possible, Stern seemed cold and sometimes even uninterested toward the people he's talking about. And quite frankly, he rarely says anything about them that hasn't been said before. So, to sort of end up here, if you're really interested in science in early 20th century Europe or Germany specifically from a strictly biographical perspective, this might have something of interest to offer you. Otherwise, this is probably going to be a general history, much of which you're already probably pretty familiar. Einstein's German World by Fritz Stern.